Thank you for joining our CBS Austin Town Hall on Artificial Intelligence. Joining us today is Abigail Maines, Chief Revenue Officer with Hidden Layer, and Daniel Collada, the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Austin.
Also joining us are Texas State Representative Mihaela Plisa and CEO and Chief Scientist for IGO, Peter Voss.
All of these people are on the front lines of AI in Austin and around the world, from the business sector all the way over to the governmental sector, and deciding whether or not we need guardrails on AI and where do we go from here. I want to start with kind of laying the groundwork with Peter Voss. Peter, you've been in artificial intelligence for decades, and you're actually working on artificial general intelligence, and you actually coined that term, AGI.
Yes.
And we'll get to that in a minute, but where are we in terms of artificial intelligence? How robust is it? How is it working? Where are we with the technology?
Yes, so over the last few years, there's been tremendous growth and progress in the field of AI. And of course, particularly in the last 2 years, where we've now had ChatGPT, generative AI, and it just does phenomenal things. However, on the trajectory to real AI, to AGI, to true human level AI, we really, in a way, on the wrong path. In fact, the chief scientist for Meta, for Facebook, Jan LeCun, recently said that large language models are an off-ramp to AGI, a distraction, a dead end. So why is that? Well, these large language models now consume an insane amount of power, and they cannot learn interactively. So people are talking about building models that may cost $100 billion. Billions of dollars, take months to create. You use them for a few months and then you throw them away because they cannot learn interactively. So it's really on the wrong path at the moment. But there is, of course, a lot of interest and a lot of good use cases in the meantime. But it's just getting out of hand in terms of how much training and how much power they need.
So you see it morphing into something that's more of a learning model than just a machine learning model where we tell it what to do and what to learn. We'll get back to AGI in just a minute. But Daniel Collada with the City of Austin, what are the real world implications of AI? How are you actually integrating it into things that will affect me? Are you trying to optimize my electric bill, or how are you using AI?
Yep, so the city doesn't have any AI systems to interact directly with the public now, but we have been doing some research and some pilots to figure out how to better optimize our systems and our operations so that we can serve the community better. So doing things like wildfire detection and smoke modeling, doing some things around emergency communications, and as well as transportation modeling and optimization. So really those big systems that do have effects on our community, so that we can work better, faster, and more efficient for you.
Keep us safer and trying to make sure the city government runs more efficiently.
Exactly.
Abigail, I'd love to ask you and turn to you. Your company deals with cybersecurity as it relates to artificial intelligence. Explain how that works and what your company does.
Yeah, similar to any other sort of part of the technology stack, you need to have cyber controls around AI, just like an endpoint or a network or a cloud environment. So we basically bring typical sort of cyber tools and techniques to securing AI, both generative, which we're talking about, but also predictive. So some people don't realize there's so much predictive models or traditional facial recognition models, classification models that are already in use. I think generative has really made AI sort of a buzzword, but it's been around for a long time. So we've already been interacting with it for a long time. And your experience is very similar to what I talk to customers about all day long. Fortune 100 banks, Department of Defense, they're all sort of ideating with various internal and external use cases of generative AI. But they want to do it very cautiously, or with the guardrails or with the appropriate controls to ensure that the customer experience is what they expect.
And to that point, artificial intelligence has been around and been in Texas for quite some time. Representative Plisa, I'd love to ask you, how do you in the legislature see the relationship between the state and these AI businesses? How would you like to see that relationship play out in an ideal world?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Look, at the end of the day, Texas is one of the largest economies in the world, the 7th largest economy in the world, and we want to make sure that we are giving an opportunity for all these great businesses to be innovative. creative, right? To be able to use these technologies, but also creating a safe space for people, right? So that their images are protected, their voice is protected, their data is protected. And so that's, I think, where the legislature comes in, right? We want to make sure that Texas stays competitive with the rest of the nation or the rest of the world when it comes to being innovators of AI technologies, right? But that we're also keeping our constituency safe. You know, we've heard a lot about these deepfake scams, right? And so that we're creating a safe space for constituents and also educating them about what AI is and how it's being implemented for the good and for the bad in Texas.
And not only to the point of businesses, but as well as workers, Walt, correct?
Exactly, and that's a big fear for workers, right? Is AI going to take my job away? The big dock strike that we're dealing with now this week, or, you know, that has been in the works for a while, the impetus for that, and even the one in Hollywood is AI going to take our jobs away? And we have a question from a viewer now. This is for Daniel, a question from a viewer named James. Are we protecting people's job security from being replaced by artificial intelligence? And how do we make sure people don't get left behind as our city continues to grow and integrate this technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think improving AI literacy and making sure people have the training they need to use these tools effectively across many different types of jobs and sectors is really key. We do want to make sure at the city organization that we're considering these as tools that people use, not replacements for people. So we're really devoted to training our large workforce, making resources available for the community, making sure that everyone has equitable access to these tools that they can bring forward in their jobs.
You know, and I've talked to Peter about this before, and as we were putting this together, it's don't be afraid of it. Dip your feet into the water, play with ChatGPT, get used to these learning models to know how they work and how they can help you, you know, navigate this new frontier.
Exactly, and Representative Lisa, another question from a viewer that we received was specifically about the role that the state government is going to play. That viewer asked, exactly how is it that the legislature is going to protect me from artificial intelligence? What would you say to that?
Well, you know, I was really honored to have sponsored a couple of bills last session that were passed into law, one specifically dealing with children and deepfakes and pornography, right? And so we're, like I said, trying to create spaces to keep people safe. We have seen with the advancements of artificial intelligence that people are using people's images without their knowledge, their voice without their knowledge, right? And so we want to create legislation that is protecting people and letting people know that they can't do those types of things. There's also a space, right, in the legislature to create invisible watermarks, right? So that when you are creating AI-generated you know, videos or whatever it is, imagery, that there's going to be an invisible watermark there to let people know this was created using AI. This was not, you know, a human journalist that sat down and wrote this or a videographer that created this image. So that's a little bit of the kind of places that the legislature is dabbing their feet. But, you know, we have a select committee on AI that's looking at these things currently, and AI is being used all over our state, from the finance sector to farmers are using it, you know, to take care of their crops. Our medical professionals are using it. So I 100% agree with you that we need more AI literacy, right, in our schools. We need to provide these tools to institutions of higher learning so that they can be providing the education to graduates, right?
To the point of the advisory council, I know we do want to ask you a little bit more about that later on in the roundtable discussion, but I'd love to get your thoughts on House Bill 2700, as you mentioned, the regulation of child pornography and the implementation of AI with that. We're talking about sort of broad reforms within the legislature on artificial intelligence. When it came to crafting that legislation and others like it, what's kind of running through your mind as a lawmaker of how to approach regulation? What are kind of the biggest things that you say, okay, if I am going to step in on regulating artificial intelligence, these are the boxes we need to check for it?
Well, I think when I look at any piece of legislation, I'm looking at, is this a real need, right? And we've seen that this was a real need that children's images were being used, that there was a loophole that was found in the law and children's images were being used, right? Also, is it ethical, right? And obviously it wasn't. And so, like I said, you want to regulate, but you don't want to over-regulate. You still want to create a competitive market, and Texas needs to be able to compete in a global market. And so that's how this bill came about. There's going to be we found some other loopholes, right, that we need to close as we go into the next legislative session, and I look forward to kind of fixing some of the things that we missed last session. But, you know, I think that parents need to also be educated. You know, we love to share things about our family on social media. You know, I have cousins who share their kids' birthdays, who, you know, put all this stuff out there. I think parents need to recognize if you're putting your child's image on the internet, if you're putting your child's birthday on the internet, there might be bad actors there that are, you know, taking this data and they might use it in a horrible way, right? And so it's twofold. You need the government to step in, but you also need people to become educated on what AI is and how it's being implemented in our state.
And so much about the question of ethics is really playing a role in the conversation that we're having with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and Peter, as you deal with artificial intelligence and now artificial general intelligence, you know, a lot of people are concerned about how do we diversify AI? You know, if we're, you know, training these AI models with our worldview, how are we going to bring other worldviews into the AI model? And with AGI and a learning model, is that going to be able to learn diverse views as it comes up with its learning models? I guess the fear is that there's only going to be one perspective fed into the AI machine, and it's not going to really, you know, take care of everyone's needs. It's just going to focus on certain needs of the builder.
Yes, my view is that we really want to get to more intelligent systems, because we can use those then also to protect, you know, children, or to really find criminals more easily. At the moment, the AI systems really aren't smart enough. So the point, you know, that you mentioned here, that systems that can actually learn interactively will allow people to have much more individualized AIs, and we call that a personal assistant. And I double up on the word personal, because to me the view is we should have personal assistants that personal belong to us, they serve our purpose and not some mega corporation. You know, that we are no longer the product, but that your AI belongs to you. You control it. You control what it shares with whom and all that. And the second personal is that it's hyper-personalized to you. You teach it your goals, your values, and you know what you want to share with people. That to me is the vision of AI that will really help people flourish. That, you know, where your AI can help you, give you advice, help you think things through. Now, I believe that AI is inherently better at rational thinking than we are. So a lot of the mistakes that we make are really because of our reptile brain, so to speak. You know, our emotions we're getting carried away with emotions, or we don't think things through. So having this personal AI that is really can reason very well and can also get a lot of information will make us better informed and allow us to make better decisions. But it can also then be the guardian for your children, you know, to really, it'll be smart enough to really figure out what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, and so on. That's the kind of future that I see with real AI.
Customizable AI, and I'll ask it, should I send this email or not? They'll say, do not send that email, please.
Right.
Abigail, you're on the front lines of, you know, the bad actors, right? That want to corrupt these machine learning models, that want to, you know, tell the machine 1 + 1 = 16 and kind of really mess up the codes.
Right.
How prevalent is that? Who should be integrating safeguards now for these bad actors? It's kind of like the hackers. Their motivation is money and disruption.
Sure.
And it was interesting that you also have Microsoft now investing in you,
Sure.
A big announcement on that. So I wanted to ask you about those security safeguards, and there's a viewer question. A viewer who wishes to remain anonymous asked, how do you allow AI to foster positive experiences while instituting safeguards and privacy when the entire premise of AI is based on machine learning?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and there's lots of different ways to do that. We take an automated sort of tool approach. I think there's also, you can start with employee or personal training. You know, basically, just like when we first had to roll out new technologies, we said, you know what you're doing? You're putting confidential data in this? You're not allowed to put confidential data in this. So just training is like step one. Step two would be, there's definitely guardrails in the foundational LLM. So when you're thinking about things like ChatGPT or Azure, OpenAI, ChatGPT, those are all sort of big foundational models that we're all interacting with, whether we know it or not. They have guardrails built into them. And then, of course, companies like Hidden Layer exist to provide additional efficacy on top of those guardrails. We are seeing attacks. We're definitely seeing adversarial activity. Adversaries go after attractive targets. Attractive targets would include things like banking, the financial sector, highly regulated organizations like the federal government, both in the United States and globally. So that's generally where we're seeing the most sort of prevalent adversarial activity today.
To get money and benefit the hackers. You know, Michael, you know, is dealing with it all the time, this election season, right? You know, let's change the narrative through AI and to get people to believe something that isn't real, but it looks really real. It's so hard to tell with AI these days.
Exactly. And Abigail, I'd actually love to get a follow-up question to you. When we talk about that sort of regulation of businesses when it comes to AI, as you mentioned, you know, stopping you from putting in that sensitive information, it sounds like a lot of the onus is on the business rather than yourself or, you know, any sort of outside regulator, any sort of...
Yeah, well, definitely. I think businesses absolutely feel responsible. It's interesting with AI. In other sort of technological evolutions, security was way behind the adoption, particularly in things like cloud. If you guys remember when we had cloud, then we had COVID, everybody moved to the cloud immediately. Security was way behind. It's interesting with generative AI in particular, security is right in the room when we're talking about the labs, the POCs that are happening about how to adopt. So companies feel very, very aware and sensitive to the fact that they do not want to have some sort of inappropriate experience with their AI, whether it's a consumer, it's a B2C or a B2B organization. And I think Microsoft, who is an investor, who's a customer and a partner of Hidden Layer, is really doing some tremendous sort of coupling of security topics along with the technology, which is new. That is sort of, I think the pace of adoption of generative AI has really fostered that and required it.
It's happening so fast.
Very fast.
And you talked about the guardrails, especially with election. If you ask ChatGPT or Copilot, any of those search engines out there, there's enough information with AI now to predict who could win the presidential race. They will not give you an answer anywhere in terms of what's happening in politics right now when it comes to the presidency, which is a guardrail that is interesting that's built in there now. If you are at home right now and you try to ask it who will win or what are the numbers, it won't give you an answer.
I want to talk about a different kind of security with you, Daniel. You mentioned at the beginning of this roundtable discussion that the city of Austin is not yet doing any forward-facing artificial intelligence with the residents of Austin. I'd love to get your thoughts on another application of that. Recently, the San Antonio City Government and Police Department, which, you know, we're not too far off from them physically, they announced that they're beginning to pilot a program in January that would utilize city cameras that they say could monitor crime in real time. Their goal would be to have police officers that are watching that as long as possible, but that if an officer is unavailable, they say they would have artificial intelligence watching that. Would love to get your thoughts on implementing a program like that in Austin. Would that have any reality, do you think?
We haven't explored any use cases like that. We're primarily focusing on internal operations now to understand where these tools are effective, so that that saying of, you know, not just where we could, but where we should, to provide the highest value to our residents, but also keep people safe. So we're not exploring any use cases like that now. We're mostly focusing on how you know, we can do our jobs the best we can for all of you.
Do you see any reality where, you know, it's so hard to say what artificial intelligence is going to look like even tomorrow, but, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, do you see AI playing any role in public safety, say, for example?
I mean, there already are examples, like you brought up, of AI in public safety across the nation and across the world, and right here in Texas. I think that'll have to be a community and policy conversation that we have in Austin one day when we get to it.
On that subject, I would love to turn to another viewer question from a viewer named Alexa, who asked that if we are going to use AI in public safety, how would you prevent discrimination in that process? We've heard reports that artificial intelligence has trouble differentiating between minority groups versus non-minority groups. How do you balance that need for protection of diversity when we do implement artificial intelligence like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that there are inherent biases in the data and the models that feed artificial intelligence tools, and that then can manifest those biases in the decision and the outputs that it makes. So I think being very deliberate on the tools that we use and understanding how they're created, understanding the data and feeding the right type of data to any tool, whether it be public safety or not, and understanding where those tools are used in a process. So in highly consequential decisions, we might use a tool somewhere that's of less consequence within that process, instead of making that consequential decision and keeping a human there to make those types of calls and those types of judgments, but using an AI tool for some type of support. So those are some general ways that we're thinking about how we might incorporate AI in these very important, highly consequential, and what can have bias consequences in decisions, because it's in public safety, but we have lots of instances in the city and in government where that can be the case.
You talk about implementing the right kind of data. I think that's the million-dollar question right there.
So how do you do that, Peter? How do you make sure you prevent, artificial intelligence from integrating bias in its decision-making?
Yeah, this is a good question. So the problem we have with current AI is the two problems. The one is they are trained on literally tens of trillions of pieces of information, good, bad, and ugly. They get them from the internet and from Twitter and from wherever they got them from. And the system has no way of knowing what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, or what biases are. It can't reason about its own biases. So the fact that it's trained with this sort of a lot of garbage and biases from the training set, add to that the fact that it cannot reason about biases, limits it, and that's why you want to have a human in the loop, like you say, for the critical things you want to have in the human in the loop. But again, the answer is to have better AI, to have AI that can learn incrementally, because then what it learns can be much better controlled. You're not going to be throwing 10 trillion pieces of information at it. You're going to be teaching it more like a human, the information that has been curated, and that is more balanced and validated and so on. But on top of that, the system will be able to reason about biases and things, and it'll actually be better than humans doing that, because we're not terribly good at recognizing our own biases. So the answer is to have better AI, AI that isn't bulk trained with just garbage data, and also AI that can really reason about it and adjust and learn to get better and better at the job, to avoid biases and to be fair, and so the answer is better AI.
Better AI, and one of the things you're working on with artificial general intelligence and the learning models. Now, Abigail, I wanted to ask, how much can we trust AI versus how easily can someone corrupt AI?
Yeah, I think we could trust AI. We have to use human judgment. I see a lot of use cases with human in the loop today. We think about AI at Hidden Layer as a tremendous accelerant to a lot of people's careers. It allows them to sort of offload some remedial or sort of tasks that maybe time could be better spent doing something else. So generally speaking, you still have to use your own reasoning and your own interpretation. I would say that the democratization of attacks on AI has accelerated tremendously over the last 6 months, the last 12 months, the last 24 months, for all the obvious reasons. With the level of adoption that we're seeing, you're going to see a lot more adversarial attacks. There are things like automated attack tools that allow a novice adversary to be able to manipulate a model, but not necessarily, like their motivations are very similar to any sort of cyber motivation, which is generally financial gain or disruption. So while we hear a lot and we should be very concerned with some of the topics we've already discussed, in terms of true cyber criminals, a lot of that activity, or at least the activity that we're seeing, is very much focused on financial gain against organizations that have very deep pockets. But there are tools. We're very bullish on the ability to protect companies that leverage AI. We believe that the cyber industry has a huge role to play in being able to sort of strengthen both the United States but the global models that we see out there today. And so we're very optimistic that that we will be able to keep up with the adversaries.
Well, it's a big issue for everyone, every corporation down to your household corporation. You
Right.
know, I think it's at least top of mind, and it's not like I'll get to it later. I think everybody's thinking, you know, how is AI influencing decisions?
I think education, we probably spend, 2 years ago I spent 80% of my time educating. Today I spend maybe 20% of my time, but you know, we work with a lot of different governments, and I'll say Singapore makes an investment in every person in Singapore to learn how to write good prompts, learn how to use generative AI. So I think there are some models out there that are quite innovative. Singapore is a country of 7 million people. I recognize that that's a much different scale than what we're talking about in Texas, but there are some blueprints, I think, that could help educate both you know, people in their homes and people at their jobs to use and adopt AI in a very sort of empowering way.
Best practices. For
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And to that note about the widespread interest in artificial intelligence, it's obviously a bipartisan topic in the legislature. Lots of interest in it, but we don't have a whole lot of time to get into this, but there's a lot of big interest in the legislature next session. So how much of a priority is artificial intelligence going to be, Representative Lisa?
Oh, I think it's going to be a really big issue. I mean, we are talking about a technology that changes every day, right? So the conversation we're having now is going to look completely different when we go into the legislature in January, right? And so I would hope that my colleagues are reading up on this issue, are getting educated on some of the bad actors, but also the good implications of AI and how we can make sure that we're using these tools appropriately. I think that, you know, some of the things that we've talked about today is that, you know, AI right now is kind of like your intern in your office, right? They'll prepare the memos, they'll prepare the talking points, they'll prepare the speeches, but you really need to have that human touch to kind of go over it to make sure that it sounds right, that it is correct, that the information is accurate, right? We see sometimes, and this might be, you know, user error, using the wrong prompts or whatever, that you put something in and it just is really wrong, right?
What's that called? The hallucination? Yeah, hallucination.
Yeah, you know, and so I think it is going to be really, really important. You know, we want to keep Texas competitive globally. It's something I'll say over and over again. We want to be competitive in this market, right? We don't want to over-regulate ourselves, but we want to create, like I said before, safe spaces where people feel comfortable using this technology, where people feel comfortable like, this is going to be my secretary, it's going to keep my schedule, it might give me some great recipes, it might be able to write some code for me, you know, in my job, but, you know, we have to also understand that right now I feel like there needs to be kind of like that human touch, right, to make sure that everything that's being disclosed is accurate and that we don't have misinformation being perpetrated. And we see that a lot with these social media algorithms. People don't recognize that the information that is being fed is an AI algorithm, right? And so that's why I think one thing that I'm going to be focusing on next session is just disclosures. Letting people know what it is that they're looking at, especially around the election time. You know, we're 30 days away from an election. Texas did pass a bill that makes it illegal to use any kinds of deep fakes, right, in your campaign. I can't go and make a deep fake of my opponent doing something crazy, right, to try to change the election. And I think those are smart, responsible regulations that Texas should continue being the leader on.
Talking about, we obviously have had legislation in the past. You know, the legislature is really kind of shaping up to tackle it head on in the next session. We laid a lot of the groundwork. As you mentioned, the AI Advisory Council, there's also a House Select Committee. With that, do you think that the chips are falling the way that they need to be? Do you think that the right people are at the table as it stands today to be making these sorts of big scale decisions in the legislature on AI?
Well, I think, you know, there's always room for more voices at the table, right? I think that this is, like I said, an ever emerging technology, and that there's lots of voices that need to be heard. And I'm really excited to get into the legislature next session and hear witness testimony and invite these people in, you know, to tell me what's going on within their business. What are they experiencing in their financial sectors or in their cities, right? And how they're implementing AI. The legislature needs to, you know, not be kind of like the arm that puts their finger on the scale of things. We just need to make sure that what we're doing is ethical, that what we're doing is just, that it's balanced, right? And I think that that's the role of government right now in AI.
If I can, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about the relationship between businesses and the legislature on AI. Peter, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, specifically as it pertains to, as State Representative Lisa kind of indicated, the legislature putting its finger on the scale on artificial intelligence. How do you balance the need for regulation, say, with the desire for innovation, with the desire to keep moving forward? How do you have that dynamic, and how would you like to see the legislature weigh in on that?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that more technology will help us to better manage the outcomes we want, basically. Because right now the human has to be in the loop, and humans are expensive, so there are only so many humans you have in the loop to check things. But once AI technology is smart enough that it can become really the guardian, the policeman, to watch things. I mean, an example is in education. There really isn't good enough software right now, and it's sort of marginal, but it's not really quite good enough to detect whether an essay was written by ChatGPT or not.
Oh, I know when my staff writes something through ChatGPT.
There you go.
The human interaction.
But yes, but you're not an AI, you're a human, so you can figure it out. So I think having better technology, so yes, I think the government shouldn't stand in the way for developing more technology, but where I think the government can really help is, like you said, deep fakes shouldn't be allowed, should be illegal, or that, if it's satire, it should be marked as satire. If somebody steals some material, again, child pornography, enforcing these things already illegal, but making sure that you have the enforcement and the focus is on actually prosecuting illegal behavior. And people can adapt if there's sort of fake news or something coming up. I mean, that's been around for a long time. Okay, it's more intense now and more sophisticated, but people adapt. They can recognize it, or maybe they want to live in their little bubble where they only hear what they want to hear, So I don't think the government should really get involved with that. But, things that are illegal and deep fakes where somebody's impersonating somebody else, that should be illegal, So disclosure, I think, as you said, disclosing what is the source of the information, I think that's really where government can help. But as far as developing technology more, we want better technology. That'll help us.
It's so hard to tell. Some of these deep fakes are so good.
Yeah.
Soon we're going to really need some help to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's why, listening to the subcommittee on AI, they're talking a lot about these invisible watermarks, right? Especially on the deepfake videos. It would be a watermark that's embedded in the code when the video or whatever digital asset's being created. When that's being created, there will be an invisible watermark. And so when that digital asset gets put up on social media or put up on the internet, it will say this was AI generated, right? And so that's just one step that I think the legislature could do, just like what we did when we were regulating kind of campaigning in social media and how that looks. This was paid for by a politician or whatever. You get those disclosures. It would be somewhat similar, and I think that would be smart legislation, right?
Well, I don't want to disclose that I used AI to make my hair look better. But if I have to, I will. As we close out, I wanted to ask you all, as we say goodbye here, Hollywood has really scared us. Rogue AI, they're going to close the bay doors and continue the mission, and we're doomed because AI says we got to finish the mission. So, you have that narrative out there, like AI is going to take over and we're just going to be at their mercy. But looking at the wonder of AI and all the possibilities, and then you're also dealing with the worry, and I think I know what everyone's answer is, but I want to ask, how do we balance that, Abigail? How excited are you about AI? I know you're a big proponent of it, but what keeps you up at night about it? What worries you about it?
That's a great question. So yes, I'm very optimistic about AI. I think humans are very smart. My money's on humans to be able to leverage AI for advancements. I like the best use case I can think of, because my father died of a very hard to detect cancer, is that AI does a better job detecting cancer much earlier, and it can afford people a much better quality of life with very bad illnesses. So I'm very bullish on AI. What keeps me up at night? You know, I don't know if it keeps me up at night, but as we're talking about legislation, you know, when you look at the global picture, some people will say the AI Act in the EU is very prohibitive, and it definitely maybe weighs on the scale. I think we would agree in some respect with that. What I will say, when I talk to chief security officers, chief privacy officers across the United States, they say, yeah, it's very heavy-handed, but it's one. The United States has about 25 different versions of AI Acts, and over time we'll get 50 different AI Acts. So I think we would like the United States federal government to provide more controls of consistency, because the regulations by state do slow companies down.
You know, I just talked to Arthi Prabhakar. She was the chief policy officer for the White House. She says that's an issue. Texas will have one, California will have one. We need a unified code so everybody can operate, but also unleash the innovation, like you were saying, and not have guardrails that, you know, because I don't know what the guardrails are in China or other countries that are developing AI. So we don't want to make sure, we want to make sure we're leaders and not behind, but also protected. What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm very excited about the potential of AI tools that we can use across government and city operations. You know, one of the things I think about a lot is there are many situations in the city government where we have to be right, and we need to make sure that when we're using tools or considering using tools, that they can be right in those situations, or we need to not use them in this situation. So being extremely thoughtful about the consequences of the entire process and the decision we're using, and making sure that we use tools or not appropriately based on what we're really thinking about what we're doing.
And that scares you, right? Making the wrong decision with the wrong AI model or something. Yeah.
It could be a scary situation.
Yeah. And it's moving so fast, you know. Well, what do you think?
Well, you know, I love a good movie like Megan. I don't know if y'all remember that hit last year that, you know, scared us all of AI. I love that stuff too. But I'll be honest, I agree with you. You know, I'm really excited about some of these things that I've seen, these emerging technologies. I think that it's great for Texas, and I think it's great for business in Texas, right? I would like the state of Texas to lean in more with AI and education, and making sure that our institutions of higher learning have access to these tools and are teaching graduates how to use these tools, right? But the thing I think that keeps me up at night when I think about AI, or I think about the bad things that might happen, is really our most vulnerable communities that tend to be our senior citizens, who can be easily scammed by an AI bot calling them and saying, Grandpa, this is your granddaughter, I need $10,000, you know, and it sounds like their granddaughter, and it's calling from the granddaughter's number, and so they're getting scammed. Like, those types of things are keeping me up at night. When I hear young girls' image being used in pornography or ways that are just not appropriate, they're being bullied at school with these images, those are the things that I'm trying to prevent, and those are some of the things that kind of keep me up at night, and the things I want to focus on when we go back in the legislature and talk about regulating AI, more on the criminal sector than it is, you know, limiting businesses or the state to use AI.
Yeah.
So, Walter, are you going to share your AI secret about hair?
Still working on it. The phone's not right yet.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, I think we need smarter AI. I think that a lot of the risks in AI right now are because it's not smart enough. It doesn't know what it's doing. And if we had smarter AI, it can help us with all of these things. You know, it can help detect when somebody's being scammed, you know, either at the bank level or, you know, for the individual who is being scammed. So I think there's so many different areas where smarter AI can help us. And the way to smarter AI is to get away from the total focus on this big data approach, you know, which is basically a lot of good, bad, and ugly data. And that's what everybody's working on now, just getting more data, bigger models. The answer is to have quality rather than quantity. And that approach is called cognitive AI as opposed to statistical. And I wish more people were working on that and looking at that so that we can truly have smarter systems sooner.
It's an exciting road ahead for sure. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, Michael will be on the front lines covering the legislation. You'll probably see a lot of Michael at the state capitol.
Not the last of me, right?
We'll see you next year.
Keep tuning in for Tech This Out segments where I profile some of the great innovations that are happening here in Austin and Central Texas and the state of Texas as a whole. And you know, there's so many things with AI. There's so much promise and excitement. There are also problems, and we're just at the beginning of this, so hopefully we took a look at some of the issues as we move forward together. Thank you for joining us for the CBS Austin special, Tech This Out, AI in Austin. Have a good night.